Child curfew laws. Odds are your city has one. Wichita State University reports that in most jurisdictions, minors are required to be at home between 11 p.m. and 6 a.m. And penalties can include fines and community service, even jail time for the parents of offenders. According to the Encyclopedia Americana, the country's first official ordinance was actually issued in Omaha, Nebraska, around 1880 to keep youths absent from, quote, steamboat landings, railroad stations, and low variety shows. Oh, those crazy kids in the steamboat landings. Well, today, supporters say the laws reduce crime and protect children. Critics believe they're unconstitutional and only give a false sense of security. Joining me now to debate this today in the Stream Team, CNN political analyst Roland Martin. In Chicago, Mike Shields, the president of the Fraternal Order of Police. And Dr. Steven Salzman also with us. He's a trauma surgeon and police officer also in Chicago. He's on the phone with us. Mike, let me start with you. A new curfew for Chicago children just passed the city council. It states minors aged 12 and younger need to be in their homes by 8:30 p.m. on the weekdays. Will this or any curfew really keep kids safe?
Well, I think that any law directed at keeping children inside the house is a good start. But, you know, unfortunately, we're living in Chicago that, you know, without having more policemen to be able to enforce it, it's going to be a difficult challenge to actually accomplish this mission.
Roland, what do you think? You live in Chicago.
Well, actually, look, I lived in Chicago for 6 years, and I can tell you, I covered any number of funerals of children who were killed in that city. It is one of the deterrents. I think some people, when they make the assumption that somehow this is the be-all to end-all, they are wrong. I certainly believe parents must be held accountable when it comes to knowing where their children are, but I suggest to Chicago, utilize those parents who've lost their kids in PSAs, in billboards, to go on radio and television to say why this is needed.
Steve, you're a trauma surgeon and a police officer. Do you think this is a good idea? How necessary is it to keep these kids off the streets based on your line of work?
You know, in the end, will it curtail the actual violence happening? I don't honestly believe that, but what it will possibly do is take these young kids who are many times the victims of violence as sort of this collateral damage of this war that's being waged on the streets, right, and take them out of harm's way. Basically, when we see violent crime, the majority of these shootings and violent crime that we see happen between the hours of 10 p.m. and 4 a.m. So if we can get these younger children off of the street earlier in the evening when we have these violent crimes being committed, I would think that the hope is that we would take these children out of the line of fire and potentially save lives. In and of itself, I think that would be huge because anybody that does my line of work, certainly here in Chicago, we see countless numbers of young, innocent children that are victims of violence because the entire street is being sprayed with gunfire and they just happen to be at the wrong place at the wrong time.
Right. Roland, do you think this is constitutional?
Look, if someone says, is it constitutional? I think it is. I'll say this here. For every parent who's had to bury a 9-year-old, a 10-year-old, or 11-year-old, I'm sure the last thing they thought about is what the ACLU thinks or what critics actually think. At the end of the day, you have to figure out how to control a situation. As the doctor just said, is the collateral damage. When you have kids being shot inside of their homes with bullets being fired from the outside, that's also an issue. This also helps police because when you have those kids out there, frankly, they shouldn't be on the streets. They need to be able to see all these crazy characters, especially the gang members who are causing lots of this violence.
Mike, would you like to respond to that? Roland says this will help police.
Well, I think so, too. I think it's a good start. But if there's not enough police to police the streets, it's going to be a challenge to do this. And this city council ordinance is in response to a 9-year-old that was shot at 3 in the morning who stepped outside of his house after staying up until 3 in the morning with his father playing video games. You know, what planet do we live on where a 3-year-old is up with his father until 3 in the morning? You know, parents' actions have to change as well.
Well, first of all, Mike, no offense, but this was a 9-year-old playing a video game in the house with the father. And so now you're right. I don't know why you're stepping out at 3 a.m. But look, if it's summertime and you want to be up with your kid and you're going to get up late the next day, so be it.
To me, that's not the issue. A 9-year-old child at 3 in the morning?
You know what, Mike? I'll be honest with you. I stayed up till 5, 6 o'clock in the morning watching movies. So that's what happened.
With the 9-year-old?
No, when I was 9. I stayed up watching movies. That's what kids do. We stay up.
Dr. Salzman. Salzman, let me get back to you here quickly. Some of the critics say that, it just isn't worth the police overtime. How is this really going to be enforced? But you still say, yes, it absolutely is worth it based on what you see in the hospital and what you've seen on the streets there. Is that true?
Yeah. I mean, again, I have a very interesting perspective on it, seeing things from both sides of the coin. So, again, when all you need to see is one child that's innocent and that's the victim of a violent crime, and to watch one time to deliver that news to the mother and father, your son or your daughter has been killed, and they've done nothing wrong. They're not members of a gang. They weren't doing anything wrong. They were just basically victims of circumstance at the wrong place at the wrong time. And I think a lot of this stems on you have to be out of the box in terms of our thinking. I'm also part of something called Ceasefire, which is, again, another violence prevention organization to try to prevent recidivism and retaliation. But the long and short of everything is it's got to be multifactorial. We have to approach this problem with a lot of out-of-the-box thinking, and it's every little bit helps, because if we could save one child's life, you can't imagine how much devastation follows, not just the child's life, but the families and the other loved ones. I mean, this is war, and truly needs to be approached like that. So every little bit helps. Is this the end-all, be-all, and the answer to the problem? No, absolutely not. I think everybody on the panel will agree that's not the answer. But save one life, and one life at a time, that's a start.
All right, Dr. Steven Salzman, Mike Shields, Roland Martin, as always, thank you very much. Very, very important discussion to be having.